We learned today that actress Diane Keaton has died in California. She was 79 years old. Keaton's family made the announcement but did not specify a cause. As CBS's Ali Bauman reports, Keaton's self-deprecating grace.
Yes, I'd have to go through all the many regrets in my life and the many,
privacy issues, abortion issues, an enormous amount of pressure.
At 89 years old, Woody Allen finally broke his silence. Not through a polished statement or a press release, but through private talks that are now leaking out. People close to the legendary filmmaker say he's been completely shattered and caught off guard by her death. But here's the real question. Why surprised? They'd known each other for more than half a century. 56 years of history, 9 movies together, countless memories. She wasn't just another actress, she was his muse, his biggest supporter, the woman who never really left his orbit. And now, what Allen's revealing in the wake of her passing flips the whole story we thought we knew on its head. This wasn't some ordinary Hollywood partnership. This was a connection tangled with love, pain, and obsession. Too complicated to last as a romance, but too deep to ever truly end. For years, we saw them through the lens of Annie Hall, through the charming comedies, through the polished public smiles. But the real story? It's darker, messier, and painfully human. More raw than anything Woody ever put on film. She stood by him when almost everyone else walked away. She defended him when it cost her everything. And now, nearing 90, facing his own mortality, Allen is finally opening up. He's talking about her, the woman who saved him, the love he couldn't hold on to, and the regrets that still follow him like shadows. Flashback to 1969, Woody Allen was casting for his Broadway play, Play It Again, Sam. He'd seen dozens of women, talented, gorgeous, and forgettable. Then she walked in, Diane Keaton. 23, fresh from California, dressed like she raided 3 closets at once, talking in this quirky, unpredictable rhythm that made zero sense but felt totally real.
We go back a long way, Diane and I, but from the minute I met her, she was a great inspiration to me. She's much of what I've accomplished in my...
Allen later described that first meeting in words that now sound almost prophetic. He said she was adorable, funny, totally original in style, real fresh. But what he didn't admit publicly, what close friends say now, is that he was scared. Terrified, because Diane was everything he wasn't. She had light where he had darkness. She was hopeful where he was bitter. She was free while he was trapped inside his own anxious mind. He cast her instantly, not just because she fit the role, but because he couldn't stand the thought of not seeing her again. Within weeks, they were dating. Within months, she'd moved into his apartment. Their friends joked the relationship would last 6 months, tops. How could it possibly work? He was the tightly wound intellectual from Brooklyn analyzing everything to death. She was the California dreamer who'd just shrug and say, la-di-da, and somehow mean it. He lived in his head and she lived in the moment. He collected worries, she collected joy, and somehow it worked, well, at least for a while. Between 1969 and 1971, those were the happiest years of Allen's life. He admitted that much to close friends later on. With Diane, he felt seen. Not as Woody Allen the celebrity, but as Alan Konigsberg, the awkward Brooklyn kid who never felt good enough. She had this magic about her. She'd look at him in a way that made him believe maybe he was okay. They'd spend hours wandering through Central Park. She'd point at clouds, dogs, kids playing, and just feel joy. He'd never understood that kind of simple happiness before, the kind that didn't need a reason. She tried to teach him that, but he couldn't really learn it. His mind just didn't work that way. Living together soon exposed the cracks. Allen's kind of love came with rules, soft control wrapped in care. He wanted to know where she was, who she spoke to, what she was thinking. He'd rewrite her words, try to make her sharper, more refined.
Hi.
Oh, hi. Hi.
Well, bye.
More like the women he invented in his scripts. But Diane wouldn't play along, not by fighting. That wasn't her way. She pushed back simply by staying herself. When he corrected her grammar, she'd grin and say the wrong thing again. When he handed her books to expand her mind, she stuck with her photography magazines. When he criticized her wild fashion choices, she doubled down the next day, or even bolder. It drove him insane and made him love her more. She was the one person he couldn't direct, couldn't rewrite, couldn't reshape, and that terrified him. Friends from that era remember the arguments, not screaming matches, but cold, cutting debates. He'd pick apart her thoughts, her choices, her entire way of being, and she'd just look at him with those calm eyes and say, "You think too much." That line alone would send him spiraling, because she was right. The breaking point came in 1971. Francis Ford Coppola was casting The Godfather. Through some connections, Diane landed an audition for Kay Corleone. At first, she almost didn't go, and that moment would quietly shift everything. Alan brushed it off at first. "It's a gangster flick, not your thing. You're doing Play It Again, Sam with me." But something deep down told Diane to go anyway. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe instinct, maybe her first real spark of rebellion. And just like that, she landed the part. She hadn't even read the full script before saying yes. Years later, she laughed about it, saying, "How bad is that? I didn't even really read it, but I needed a job." But people close to them knew better. It wasn't just about needing work. She needed freedom. She needed air. When Diane told Alan she'd be flying out to California for months and missing his movie, he didn't yell or fight. He just went quiet. That cold, wounded silence said more than words ever could. Then, after what felt like forever, he finally muttered, "You're choosing Coppola over me."
I mean, you don't have to, you know.
No, I know, but you know, I'm all perspired and everything.
Well, didn't you take a shower at the club?
I mean, no, because I never shower in a public place.
Why not?
Because I don't like to get naked in front of another man, you know?
"You're choosing them over us." She tried to explain to make him understand. It wasn't betrayal. It was her career, her life. But to him, that didn't matter. In his mind, she'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. So she left. And something between them cracked for good. It never fully healed. While Diane was out filming The Godfather, something else began. Something Alan would never stop thinking about. She fell for Al Pacino. It wasn't instant, not some on-set scandal, but it was real. You could see it in every frame. The spark on screen came from something alive off-screen. Pacino had this raw, dangerous charisma, the total opposite of Alan's neurotic control. Alan thought through everything. Pacino felt everything. For Diane, after 2 years of being molded and micromanaged, Pacino was a rush of wild energy. She wasn't officially dating him then, but the seed was planted, and Alan could sense it. He could feel it burning. He watched the footage and saw the way she looked at Pacino, that softness in her eyes, that ease in her laugh. Friends say Alan became consumed by The Godfather, constantly asking mutual friends about the shoot, about Diane, about her co-stars. He needed to know what was happening 3,000 miles away. When she finally came back to New York, she was different. Glowing, confident, sure of herself. She just worked with Coppola, Pacino, and Brando. She'd been part of something legendary. Suddenly, Alan's intellectual comedies felt small next to that. They still tried to make it work. She starred in his next movie, then another, but the spark had shifted. She wasn't his discovery anymore. She was her own woman now, a movie star who didn't need his direction to shine. By 1972, it was over. Who ended it? Depends who you ask. Alan said it was mutual, but friends whisper Diane walked away. What's certain is that she was tired. Tired of being fixed, tired of being analyzed, tired of feeling like a science project instead of a person. She wanted to be loved for who she was, not who he thought she could become. Alan didn't really love her. He loved the idea of her, the fantasy, the version he could script, polish, and perfect. But the real Diane, unpredictable, passionate, beautifully messy, that terrified him. And you'd think that'd be the end, right? They break up, move on, life goes on. But Woody Allen doesn't do move on, he rewrites it. 5 years later, in 1977, he made Annie Hall and made sure Diane starred in it. This wasn't inspired by their story, it was their story. Scene by scene, moment by moment, pulled straight from real life. The awkwardness, the fights, even the jokes, all of it ripped from their relationship. And that name? Annie Hall. Annie was her real nickname, and Hall was her last name before she changed it to Keaton. Alan wrote the role so tightly around her that no one else could have played it. He even had her wear her own clothes from their dating days. Those baggy suits, the ties, the hats. That wasn't costume design. That was Diane. He was putting their entire love story on film, exposing every secret, every moment of heartbreak, every flaw, and making her relive it for the whole world to see. Some called it art, others called it manipulation. Diane called it weird and painful, but she still said yes, because even after everything, The control, the emotional games, the endless dissecting. She still believed in him as a filmmaker. Maybe part of her even wanted to freeze their story in time, to keep it alive somehow, even if it hurt. Annie Hall became a cultural phenomenon. It won Best Picture. She won Best Actress. And suddenly the world thought they knew the truth about their love. But they didn't. Not really. Because Alan had rewritten the ending. In real life, it had been messy, sad, and unfinished. In Annie Hall, it was poetic, bittersweet, and romantic. He'd taken heartbreak and turned it into beauty. He'd taken her leaving and turned it into something mutual, something noble. He didn't just tell their story, he recreated it exactly how he wished it had gone. And she let him. Years later, Alan finally confessed to close friends what Annie Hall really was. Not a love letter, but an exorcism. He was trying to drive her out of his system, to make sense of why it all fell apart, to find peace in losing the one person who made him feel alive. But here's the thing about exorcisms. Sometimes they fail. Sometimes the ghost stays. Sometimes you're haunted forever. After Annie Hall, something strange happened. Their romance? Done, finished, over for good. But their professional bond, that was just beginning. Between 1978 and 2020, Diane Keaton appeared in 8 more Woody Allen films. Manhattan in 1979, Manhattan Murder Mystery in 1993, and more sprinkled across 4 decades. Just think about that. 42 years of working together after the breakup. 42 years of seeing each other on set, of him directing her, of them creating art side by side while keeping an invisible wall between them. It shouldn't have worked. But somehow, it did. Friends say they had an unspoken deal. She could live her life. Date, love, evolve. But on screen, she was his. And he needed that. He needed her in his art, even when he couldn't have her in his arms. One friend recalled him saying, "Every other actress gets compared to her." And that was the truth. Every single performance he directed, every line of dialogue was secretly measured against Diane's magic. He worked with some of the greatest, Mia Farrow, Diane Wiest, Scarlett Johansson, Cate Blanchett, but none of them were her. None had that spark, that strange, unpredictable rhythm that made his words come alive. She was his creative pulse, the heartbeat of his work, even when they were miles apart. But that connection came with a cost. Her long, complicated relationship with Al Pacino was hit hardest. Their romance stretched from 1974 to 1990, fiery, passionate, on again, off again, yet always shadowed by Alan's ghost. Even when Woody wasn't around, his presence was. Pacino could feel it. She'd leave to do a Woody Allen movie, talk about Woody's genius, Woody's brilliance, Woody's vision, and Pacino, confident as he was, couldn't compete with a man she'd already lost. How do you fight a ghost? That's what Allen had become. Someone who no longer posed a romantic threat, yet still owned a piece of her soul. Pacino wanted stability, marriage, family, her full attention. But she couldn't give it, not completely. She adored him. She'd even say later, "I was mad for him." But some part of her would always belong to Alan, tied up in memories, art, and years of shared history she couldn't shake. Then came 2014, and everything changed overnight. Dylan Farrow's accusations against Woody Allen resurfaced, sending shockwaves through Hollywood. The claims were disturbing and the reactions were immediate. Studios stepped back, actors who once praised him began distancing themselves, and award shows stopped mentioning his name. By 2018, with the Me Too movement in full force, Allen had become one of the most divisive figures in the industry. Almost everyone cut ties. Everyone except Diane Keaton. In January 2018, she posted just 13 words that would change her life. "Woody Allen is my friend, and I continue to believe him." That single tweet lit the fuse. It cost her dearly. Roles vanished, friendships ended, reputations flipped overnight. Director Judd Apatow criticized her publicly. Dylan Farrow's supporters labeled her an enabler. Articles poured out calling her loyalty disappointing, misguided, out of touch. She went from Hollywood's beloved icon to one of its most controversial figures, and she stood there, unflinching. She lost jobs. Films that were nearly hers went to other actresses. Directors who'd long admired her suddenly couldn't make it work. Even friends she'd known for decades stopped calling. The price of standing by him was brutal, and yet she refused to back down. Then came 2023, 5 years deep into the storm, and she doubled down in an interview that only made things worse. When asked if her career had been overshadowed by working with Alan, she said, "No, not at all. I'm proud. I'm proud beyond measure." Then came the line that lit up headlines. She brushed off what she called survivor culture, saying it was a horrible shame and that you got to get over it. The backlash hit instantly and hard, but once again, no apology, no clarification, no backpedaling. So what made her so fiercely, stubbornly loyal to a man she hadn't dated in over 50 years? That's what everyone wanted to know. Alan never begged her to defend him, never asked for her support, never demanded her loyalty. She gave it freely and paid for it because in her mind, it wasn't blind faith, it was conviction. After knowing him for 5 decades, seeing him at his best and worst, standing beside him through chaos and calm, she looked at those accusations and didn't believe them. Not out of denial, but because she knew her version of the man, the one who'd shaped her art, her career, and maybe a piece of her soul. Maybe she was wrong. Maybe her loyalty really did cost her more than anyone deserved to pay, but make no mistake, it was real. It wasn't blind or forced. It was a choice. Diane knew exactly what it would cost her, and she paid that price without flinching. By 2024, her health had started to fade fast. She kept it locked down. No statements, no updates, not even to most of her closest friends. People who knew her best say the signs were there if you looked close enough. She'd lost weight, she looked fragile during rare public appearances, and she quietly dropped out of several projects without a word. But she never said she was sick, never prepared anyone for what was coming. Then came October 11th, 2025. Early morning in Brentwood, emergency services were called to her home. At 8:08 a.m., she was rushed to a nearby hospital, and within the hour, the world lost her. The official announcement came later that day. Diane Keaton, 79, had passed away suddenly. No cause given, just silence. When Woody Allen got the call, sources say he froze. He couldn't even speak. "I didn't even know she was sick," he reportedly said. How could he not know? This was someone he'd known for 56 years, someone who'd worked beside him in 9 films, someone who had defended him when almost no one else would, and yet he hadn't known she was dying. That realization broke something inside him. He'd been so lost in his own isolation, so trapped in his own battles that he never saw she was quietly losing hers. The funeral was private, small, quiet, deeply personal. Just family and a few lifelong friends. Alan showed up wearing a mask, shoulders hunched, looking every bit his age, 89 years of grief weighing him down. But what broke everyone's hearts was what he brought with him, a framed photo from 1971, from the set of Play It Again, Sam. In the photo, they're both laughing. Not acting, not posing, but really laughing. The kind of laughter that comes from comfort, from knowing someone's soul. Meryl Streep, who was there, later told a friend that Alan couldn't stop crying. Not soft tears, but deep, body-shaking sobs. She said she'd never seen him like that, and neither had anyone else. Woody Allen, the man famous for turning emotion into logic, for hiding behind irony, completely fell apart that day. Every wall he'd ever built just crumbled. Later, it came out that he'd written Diane a letter, long, raw, filled with things he'd never said out loud, but he'd written it too late. She never got to read it. She died before he could send it. A few days later, something unexpected happened. Woody started talking. Not publicly, of course. He's not the type. But in quiet moments with old friends, with the few people still loyal to him, he began to open up. He confessed things he'd buried for decades, truths he'd never even admitted to himself. "I was too controlling, and she was too free," he told one friend. "I tried to reshape her into something more manageable, and she fought back by being even more herself. I loved her, but I loved the control more. That's not love, that's ownership." And then, he added something that stopped people cold. "She was right to leave." When he talked about Annie Hall, his tone changed. "I gave her the Oscar," he said quietly, "but she gave me everything else. The film, the career, the credibility, the soul of my work. Without her, I'm just another neurotic making comedies about neurotic people. With her, I created something real." About the other women in his life, he didn't hold back. "I loved Mia differently. I loved Soon-Yi differently. But Diane, I loved her the most, honestly. She saw the real me, the insecure, pathetic version, and stayed until she couldn't anymore, because I made it impossible." That was the truth he couldn't escape. His greatest regret, the thing that haunts him every day at 89, is simple. I should have just let her be. That's what he keeps saying to friends. I should have loved her the way she was, not how I wanted her to be. I should have been grateful for the miracle of her instead of trying to improve her. When people asked him later about her fierce defense of him during the worst years, when Hollywood turned its back, his answer revealed everything. She believed me when no one else would. She stood by me when it cost her everything. Her career, her reputation, her relationships. I never asked her to, never told her to, but she did it anyway, because that's who she was, loyal, stubborn, and absolutely certain of what she believed. And as those who've spoken to him now say, that's the truth he lives with, that her loyalty was both his greatest gift and his greatest punishment. Because in the end, Woody Allen didn't just lose Diane Keaton, he lost the only person who ever truly saw him. The world tried to change her in those last years, Woody said quietly. They wanted her to denounce me, to apologize, to fall in line. And she said no. The same words she'd said to him countless times when he pushed too hard. That was Diane Keaton's entire life in one word: no. There's one revelation that still breaks him: their last conversation. It happened just a few months before she died. They spoke on the phone, something they did every so often, casual, polite, almost mechanical. But this time was different. This time she was the one who called. Her voice was soft, slower than usual, and she told him something that burned into his memory forever. I don't regret any of it, she said. The relationship, the films defending you, none of it. I was who I was, and you were who you were, and it was what it was. Classic Diane. Simple, unfiltered, not overthinking it, just accepting life for what it had been. Now, at 89, when people ask Woody Allen what he wants the world to know about her, he doesn't hesitate. That she was right about everything, about me, about life, about not overanalyzing. Annie Hall wasn't the truth of us. It was my fantasy version. She was better than any character I ever wrote. He pauses there and then adds quietly, she saved me far more than I ever saved her. 56 years, 9 films, 1 impossible love. That's the true story of Woody Allen and Diane Keaton, not a tidy Hollywood romance. Not just friendship either, but something deeper, stranger, and more real than either. She was his muse, his conscience, his defender, and yes, the one who got away. He was her mentor, her tormentor, the man she never quite escaped, even after she left. The irony cuts deep. Diane Keaton, the woman who dated some of Hollywood's most desirable men, who could have had anyone, never married. And yet the longest, most loyal bond she ever had was with the man who couldn't hold on to her. And Woody Allen, a man known for moving on fast, for chasing youth, for running from consequence, never got over the California girl with the crooked smile and the fearless laugh. What they had defied every label. Too messy to be romance, too intimate to be friendship, too unresolved to belong to the past, and too painful to exist in the present. It was something else entirely. Something that existed in its own universe, a bond that only the two of them ever really understood. Now he's 89, alone, surrounded by memories and regrets, knowing he can never tell her the things he finally understands. She's gone, and with her goes the last link to a version of himself that feels like a stranger. That young director who once thought love was control, who believed passion could be shaped like a script, who confused care with ownership. Diane Keaton's legacy isn't just the films, the Oscar, or the hats and gloves that became her signature. It's that she defined Woody Allen, on screen and off. She gave his work its pulse, its humanity, its heart. She stood by him when standing by him meant standing alone. And maybe that's the real truth of their story. She saw him clearly, every flaw, every failure, every selfish impulse, and she didn't walk away. Not when they were lovers, not when they broke up, not when the world begged her to renounce him. She stayed herself, stubbornly, defiantly, completely. And in doing so, she gave him something he spent his entire career trying to fake on film: the miracle of being loved exactly as you are. In all of Hollywood's long, complicated history, there has never been anything quite like Woody and Diane. Their connection wasn't neat or perfect or easy, but it was real. Before we go, if this story moved you even a little, hit that like button and subscribe. We've got more untold stories from Hollywood's golden age and beyond, the kind that show how messy, brilliant, and painfully human these legends really were. So what do you think? Was Diane's loyalty admirable or misguided? Tell us in the comments. because some loves are too complicated to work, but too powerful to die. Woody and Diane proved that. They lived it, lost it, and left behind something that'll outlast them both: art, questions, and a love that never fit inside a frame.